Hello booktube, it's Leah Cooper here, and today I'm bringing you my January reading wrap-up. So this is the first wrap-up of 2019, and for the most part I think it went really well. I read 8 things, shockingly. Mostly on the shorter side. I think my average page count is like 225, so everything I read was pretty short, but I also did pretty well at following the TBR I set for myself. There was a couple of things that I did not get to, and there was a couple of things I added that, I didn't know I was going to be reading this month. For the most part, it was a pretty good month, and I think it's like an excellent start to the year. So let's get into talking about what I read. The first thing I read was Space Opera by Catherine M. Valente. This is Valente's latest novel. It's science fiction, and it's basically a band from Earth competing in galactic Eurovision for the fate of the planet. It's that one Rick and Morty episode. I gave this book 2.5 stars. To be honest, I wasn't really interested in this book. I picked it up because I do love Catherine Valente. She's one of my favorite living authors, and I almost always love her books. Up until this point, there's only been one other thing from her that I genuinely did not like, and that was Palimpsest, which I read a year before last. I think I read that in 2017. So this book, I don't like band-aids. If you're in fandom, you know what a band-aid is, and I don't like them. I don't get them. I don't enjoy them. I've tried to read them for like pairings that I'm really invested in, and I still don't like them. So I knew that space opera really wasn't going to be for me, but it was at my library. It was available now. And I said, I'll give it a try. Because everyone I've heard talking about it who's read it, who's a fan of Valente, has really loved it. But fundamentally, this book is not for me because, again, I don't like band-aid use. So about a third of this book is about the band that's actually competing for the fate of the planet. And I just don't care. I don't care. I'm not into musicians or music or anything like that. I listen to music, but I'm not, I don't know, music head? I don't even know what they're called. But that aside, I also feel like this book was not terribly compelling. Even if you liked band-aids, I struggle to see how this book is overly compelling. The bulk of the novel is vignettes about the other races in this galaxy. So for the most part, this book largely just feels like Valente writing a bunch of short stories, but they're not purposely short stories, so it doesn't hold together like the way the refrigerator monologues, which is a collection of vignettes, holds together. And that novella really works because it's intentionally written that way. This felt, for a story about the fate of the planet, this felt very non-stakesy because it's like, the planet's not going to explode, and there's not really any other stakes in it. And it has a huge deus ex machina for the conclusion, which was just like, I saw that 100 trillion light years back coming. And it's like someone shipped them the solution in a box, and then they opened it and they're like, oh, there's the solution. It felt so trite. It really did. So 2.5 stars. I think it's way more readable than Palimpsest. Palimpsest is almost unreadable in some ways. It's not my thing. I think if you like The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, maybe you'll like it. There we go. Okay, move on. Next thing I listened to was A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is the first time I've ever read Ursula K. Le Guin, and I've been on kind of a kick where I've been reading more classic middle grade YA fantasy on audio because they're really short. They're easy to listen to, generally speaking. So that's how I've been listening to Tamara Pierce, and I decided to go ahead and dive into some Ursula K. Le Guin while I was at it. The narrator for this, let me get the narrator's name real fast. Rob Inglis. He does fit the narration very well for this book, which is one of the reasons I picked it up. I gave it a 2.52 primarily because while I was listening to it, God, I hated Ged. I hated Ged so much. In the first half when he's training to be a wizard. This story is about universe, fantastical realm called Earthsea, and there's magic and like demons and dragons and kingdoms, and our protagonist Ged is a very, very, very poor peasant boy who has magical abilities. He's first trained by like an aunt in kind of witchy magic, because there definitely seems to be a division between male and female gendered magic. Anyways, he's eventually picked up as an apprentice by another very powerful wizard, and then sent to this wizard school that I can't remember the name of because I listened to this way at the beginning of January. And it involves his learning, growing, being a wizard, mistakes he makes, and eventually him being hunted by this shadowy demon creature that he summons into the world. So my biggest issue is I hated Ged a lot. He's very arrogant and antagonistic, and I think that's the point, and some of that's addressed. Like, his arrogance is definitely addressed in the course of the book, but like he has this like conflict with like his mortal nemesis at magic school, and I never really bought it like at all. It really just read like Ged being a dickhead because he's poor and he doesn't like the rich kid Jasper, and so he's decided to take offense at literally everything Jasper does. But then and like that would be fine too if again that was confronted, but it's not. It's kind of just like hand waved that yes, Jasper is a big dickhead, but I don't buy it, and it really soured me to the character. I think the writing is fine. It's Ursula K. Le Guin. Her writing is good. Her world building is interesting. Not the most interesting I've ever read. Will I continue with the series? Probably not. I think I'm going to try one of her other series. I think I'm going to try The Dispossessed next. Because I want to say, I want to read The Word for World is Forest. And I want to say that's the second book after The Dispossessed. I think those are the Hamish cycle. So I'm gonna try that next instead of the Earthsea books. Ged's not for me. The next thing I read was The Dream Quest of Velvet Bow by Kij Johnson. Guessing on her name. This is a Tor.com novella. It is like written as a companion to an H.P. Lovecraft story. It takes place in basically the realm of H.P. Lovecraft's gods. It's about a university professor at a women's college whose one of her students runs away with a man from the waking world. They're the sleeping world. And humans, which would be humans from our world, like H.P. Lovecraft characters, are people from the waking world who they're called dreamers in this world because they only go to the dreaming world when they're asleep. So one of her students runs away with this guy, and she is the granddaughter of one of the sleeping gods, like the horror gods of Lovecraftian mythology. And they fear that if he awakes and finds his granddaughter gone, he'll wipe out their college. So her teacher goes looking for her and goes on this mad quest all over the sleeping lands to find a key into our world, the waking world, because that's where the two lovers have fled. And I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was really good for such a short book. I didn't feel overly rushed. I felt like a lot got packed in and it was done really well. Like she legit goes on a quest, and it's very much like a typical quest, kind of like what you'd play in an MMO or something like that, or what you'd read in like The Hobbit, but it didn't have any fluff. It was just good. I liked the protagonist, Velvet Bow. I thought she was interesting. The ending might not satisfy all readers. I will grant you that. It's definitely one of those more literary type endings, but I liked it. So there you go. I would definitely recommend it. It's not as weird as I expected. I think that was my biggest disappointment. Why it wouldn't get 5 stars from me, because something where they're based in the world of H.P. Lovecraft, you just kind of expect things to be a little bit weirder than it was. The next thing I read was Saga Volume 9. So this means I'm all caught up on reading the Saga volumes. Not much I can say here. I gave this one 4 stars, solid 4 stars. The first like 3/4, it obviously picks up from the end of Volume 8, which I read last month and really couldn't say anything else. the continuing adventures in Saga. The first like 3/4 of this were a little bit like, oh, okay, yeah, it's filler, whatever. The last quarter, really good. Like, it emotionally brought me right back to like earlier volumes of Saga. So I'm looking for number 10. Next thing I listened to was Lioness Rampant by Tamara Pierce. This was read by Trini Alvarado, and this is the 4th book in the Song of the Lioness quartet. So I've now read all 4 books in that original quartet by Tamara Pierce. These are the adventures of like Alana in her middle grade YA fantasy series about a young woman who disguises herself as a boy to train to become a knight, and then her adventures after that. And I gave this one a 1.5. I hated this one the most, I think, out of the whole series, which is unfortunate. I was kind of hoping maybe it would be a little bit better than the last couple. The last couple have been like 3, 2.5. I don't think I've given any book in this quartet more than 3. Fundamentally, they're written very childishly. Like, they're written for middle grade, but they have YA themes in them. Like, there's way too much sex in them for them to be middle grade books, but they're not written smart enough for me to consider them YA books. So I don't like that. And on top of that, I fucking hate all of the romantic interests in these books. I hate them. And these are supposed to be very like pro-feminist, pro-girl fantasy books, and they are. But at the same time, the love interests, the romantic relationships are so fucking universally toxic. And like the guy she ends up with in this book, at the end of this book, like marries him. Oh god, I hate it. Because he was a fucking adult when she was like 12. And he's been trying to get into her pants since she was 16. I don't like it. I don't like it. I hate the prince who was pursuing her. She was fucking the prince for a while. I hate, she sleeps with this guy named, oh my god. So in this book, Alana is trying to find a gem because she's going to go get the gem and bring it back to her kingdom and give it to the king to like bestow great honor on herself and prove that she earned her shield and she deserves to be a knight at court. And like that plot was totally fine. I was fine with that plot. But she meets this guy called the Shang Dragon, and he's like a monk in this order, this fighting order of monks. The dragon, or no, the Shang. They're called the Shang. So like obviously Eastern Asian Tibetan influences, and the greatest warrior of the Shang is a red-headed dude named Liam. Like, you know, the bits with the Bajir in the last book, who were obviously supposed to be Bedouin nomads, was a bit iffy, but like, it doesn't even compare to Liam, the red-headed, like, Irish Shang dragon. It's way too Iron Fists for me. I can't even. On top of that, he's pretty much a dick, and Alana spends like most of the book sleeping with him, and I'm just like, why? He's a dick. So, yeah, I was not impressed with this book. And then, so like the plot of the first half of the novel is fine. One thing I will say is, like, genuinely speaking, I think the plots of these books are pretty good and pretty entertaining. It's just like some of the characters I can't stand, some of the character relationships. However, in this one, then this is why it got such a low rating too. The second half of the book's plot makes no fucking sense. It's predicated on Alana's twin brother making a decision that doesn't make sense. Like, it straight up doesn't make sense. He brings someone back from the dead, and while I could believe him bringing someone back from the dead, who he brings back from the dead, who is ultimately the antagonist of this book, huge spoiler there, but anyway, it's an old book. It's like a 20-year-old book, so who cares? Who he brings back makes no sense. Like, it's 100% done for the plot, and it's worse than the plot holes in A Conjuring of Light, which are bad. So like, yeah, I can't with this. I will not be reading any more Tamara Pierce. I'm glad I've read it. Now I have an opinion, like an informed opinion, because I mean, I read 4 books, but I'm not they're not something I would recommend to young readers at all, just because I don't think they're very good. I could probably do a whole essay on Alana's sexuality and whether or not it's actually very pro-feminist at all. I don't think it is as much as it seems. Moving on. Sounds like I had kind of a bad start to the month, ironically. I had a much better second half. The next thing I read, I still have, and that is The Five Daughters of the Moon by Lena Licatello. This is another, this is a long novella from Tor. It's like 220 pages, so it's kind of verging into short novel territory. But this is a fantasy book set in the Crescent Empire, which is supposed to be basically Russia, turn of the century. The Five Daughters of the Moon are basically, they're inspired by the Romanov sisters and the fall of the Romanov family at the time of the revolution. And except there's magic. And the villain in this book is heavily, I think, inspired by Grigory Rasputin. I really liked this. I think I gave it 4 stars. Let me double check. Yeah, I gave this 4 stars. I think it was really interesting. Each section's told by a different POV from one of the sisters, and it repeats twice. So we get 2 chapters from each sister. Each of them have their own, like, concerns and worries and goals and political machinations. They range from ages like 6 up to 18, I think. And I really liked it. I'm definitely going to be picking up the second one, which is like 300 and something pages. So the next one is definitely a full-length novel. This is more like a prequel, I think. Really. But yeah, I'll definitely be picking it up and continuing. I just thought the world was really interesting, and I thought the writing was really interesting. Or not interesting, I thought the writing was really good. So yeah, if you are interested in light steampunk imperial fantasy, I would say pick this up. The next thing I read was Exit Strategy by Martha Wells. This came in from the library. It is the fourth and final book in the Murderbot Quartet, which is an ongoing Tor.com science fiction novella series, which I'm sure you've heard of. The first book is All Systems Red. It's been everywhere. I think I've given like every single novella in the series 5 stars. I gave the final book 5 stars. I really loved it. It brought us right back around. Murderbot finds out that one of the characters from the first book has disappeared, and they think it's possibly their fault because of all the spying espionage that they've been doing in books 2 and 3, and so they decide to go and help that person out and reconnect with like all of the characters from the first book. I thought it was great. The ending was great. Very fitting. Loved it. Read them. Seriously, they're worth reading. And then the last thing I read was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This was also on my TBR and on a 5-star prediction video and on my like books I gotta get to this year. Or actually, no, it's not books I gotta get to, but it's books I was supposed to get to last year. Anyway, I gave this 4.5 stars. Not quite a 5-star read for me, but very good. One of the best things I can say about this is it's highly readable. Like the writing, Madeline Miller's writing style is very, very readable. I read this real quick, maybe like 4 or 5 days. Oh, never mind. I guess it took me 7 days. It felt like I flew through it. It's very interesting. Obviously, if you know the Iliad, then you know the basic story already. But it's still good, despite that. I bumped it down a star, or half star. I bumped it down a half star because there was one thing about mostly Achilles' characterization that kind of bugged me. And I think I get why it's like this, but at the same time, it's still kind of bugged me. And it's because the narrator of the book is Patroclus, and he's not entirely a reliable narrator because he's in love with Achilles. Oh, for anyone who hasn't heard of this, though this is, again, another one of those really famous books I feel like everyone's already read. This is the story of Patroclus and Achilles growing up as boys through the end of the Trojan War. And specifically retold from Patroclus' perspective with an emphasis on his romantic relationship with Achilles. So my biggest issue with this is that the other Greek kings and heroes are portrayed pretty accurately or honestly to how they're portrayed often in like the Iliad and the Odyssey, which means they're often really shitty dudes. Like Agamemnon is a total piece of shit, right? Like the way they treat women, horrible, just disgusting. And like all of them Agamemnon, Diomedes, even Odysseus, though obviously Odysseus is kind of an outlier, even in the Iliad. Like, the way sometimes he interacts with women. Like, his love for Penelope is very strange for the time, right? And not exactly a stereotypical characteristic. So all of the dudes are, like, pretty shitty. And then we have Achilles, who's portrayed as being so saintly by comparison. And it's gotta be just that it's because it's from Patroclus' perspective, but it's like, it felt more like the author was trying to make her characters sympathetic by not making them raging dickbag misogynists. And Patroclus is portrayed the same way. The Patroclus, it makes sense. It's like Achilles never does anything questionable when it comes to women. He's always absolved. He never seems to treat them bad, even though he's in a society where literally everyone else treats them poorly. So it's just a little bit... It feels like the author trying really hard to make her characters, her heroes, likable instead of being 100% like believable, if that makes sense. And that was really my only gripe. And it was more so the fact that, like, you could see Madeline Miller trying really, really hard to make her two protagonists really, really gay and, like, really, really good and absolve them from any criticism and just make them super, super heroic. And I was kind of like, okay, well, I can see you puppet master behind the strings. So I knocked it half a star for that, because it bugged me in, like, the middle of the book. It really did kind of bug me. But ultimately, the rest of the book was really good. The end was quite good. I thought it was interesting the way she wrote the last, like, 20% of the book. I mean, I cried my eyes out at the end. So, yeah. I think I started off with kind of like a meh beginning to January, but ultimately it culminated in, like, it gradually got better and better, and I read so many things that I really, really did enjoy. Those are the things I read in January. Comment down below and let me know if you've read any of them or thinking about picking them up, or if I've inspired you to pick them up. Yeah. Has anyone read Circe by Madeline Miller? I wasn't planning on reading it, but, like, I don't know. Should I? Should I put it on my eventual TBR? I'll get to it in 7 years when she comes out with their next book, I guess. Oops. Anyways, thank you for watching. As always, if you want to see more content from me, be sure and hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in my next video.